Transform your small garden into a vintage green oasis with recycled treasures. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this presentation on transforming a simple small garden into a timeless, vintage-inspired green oasis. Today I will take you on a journey of imagination and design, where we explore how recycled items, architectural touches, and the spirit of sustainability come together to create a unique outdoor retreat. When we think about home architecture and garden design, it is not only about the building itself, but also about the atmosphere it creates. A house without a thoughtfully designed outdoor space often feels incomplete. In modern living, where urban density is increasing and private gardens are shrinking, the art of maximizing small spaces has become both a challenge and an opportunity. The vintage garden makeover is one of the most captivating design trends that merges history, charm, and ecological responsibility into a cohesive vision. Vintage garden design is not just about replicating the past. It is about capturing its soul. It emphasizes character, nostalgia, and authenticity. Think of rustic benches, weathered pots, antique lanterns, and upcycled objects that tell stories. Each item has a history, a patina, and a sense of belonging. Unlike modern minimalist gardens, which highlight sharp lines and sleek surfaces, vintage gardens thrive on imperfection and layered textures. This philosophy fits perfectly into the global trend of sustainable architecture and design. As societies shift toward greener lifestyles, the idea of reusing old items instead of discarding them resonates deeply. A chipped watering can becomes a flower planter. A set of wooden crates transforms into shelving for herbs. An iron gate, salvaged from a bygone era, becomes a decorative focal point. These elements create a tapestry of memories while keeping waste out of landfills. The most inspiring aspect of vintage garden design is its ability to make small spaces feel expansive. Architects and landscape designers often say that limitations fuel creativity. A narrow yard, a tiny courtyard, or even a balcony can be turned into a green sanctuary with clever planning. The key lies in layering, zoning, and verticality. By layering, I mean designing gardens in tiers, ground cover plants at the base, mid-height shrubs or flower beds in the middle, and climbing vines or trellises rising above. This creates depth and gives the illusion of spaciousness. Zoning, on the other hand, involves dividing a small area into functional segments: a seating corner, a planting corner, a decorative feature, and perhaps even a mini water fountain. Verticality leverages the power of walls, fences, and trellises to host climbing plants and hanging decor, turning plain surfaces into living canvases. When combined with vintage aesthetics, these strategies create a garden that feels not only larger, but also more immersive. Imagine stepping into such a space. You are greeted by the scent of roses trailing along an old ladder turned into a vertical planter, the soft trickle of water flowing through a repurposed ceramic jug, and the charm of mismatched garden chairs that have witnessed decades of use. Architecture and gardens are interconnected in ways we sometimes overlook. The structure of a home influences the garden, and the garden, in turn, complements the architecture. For example, a Victorian-style home pairs beautifully with wrought iron furniture and ornate planters, while a mid-century modern house might find balance in simple recycled wood elements softened by lush greenery. Vintage garden makeovers often draw inspiration from architectural heritage. Brick pathways echo old-world charm. Stone walls and wooden pergolas create permanence and shelter. Arched trellises replicate the romance of European courtyards. By integrating architectural motifs, the garden becomes an extension of the home's personality, rather than a disconnected afterthought. One trend that has emerged in recent years is blending modern and vintage styles. Designers are increasingly pairing reclaimed materials with sleek modern structures. For example, a minimalist glass door opening into a garden of recycled furniture creates an intriguing juxtaposition, one that reflects contemporary lifestyles rooted in sustainability while embracing nostalgia. As we look at current design trends, several themes stand out. Sustainability is at the forefront, with homeowners prioritizing recycled, repurposed, and reclaimed materials, not just indoors, but outdoors as well. Every piece carries both aesthetic and environmental value. The philosophy of biophilic design is influencing gardens too, as people seek deeper connections with nature by incorporating natural textures, organic shapes, and abundant greenery. Vintage gardens embody this connection through aged materials and flourishing plant life. Eclectic personalization is another defining feature. Unlike uniform landscaping, vintage design allows individuality to shine. Mixing furniture styles, plant varieties, and decorative objects is not only accepted but encouraged. At the same time, wellness-oriented spaces are taking center stage, as people increasingly see gardens as places of mental restoration. Vintage gardens, with their cozy and familiar atmosphere, naturally promote relaxation and emotional well-being. Finally, the concept of hybrid indoor-outdoor living is shaping many modern homes. With limited outdoor areas, people are blending spaces by extending the design language of interiors into gardens. A rustic indoor dining table might have a matching outdoor bench, creating harmony between house and garden. Design is not merely physical, it is emotional. A small garden filled with recycled treasures evokes feelings of comfort, nostalgia, and even adventure. When you walk into such a space, you sense that it has a history. The old wooden ladder may remind you of childhood summers. The rusty metal watering can might recall a grandparent's garden. These memories are powerful, grounding us in a world that is increasingly fast-paced and digital. Psychologists often highlight the role of spaces in shaping our moods and behaviors. Gardens, especially vintage ones, serve as sanctuaries where people can disconnect from technology, breathe fresh air, and reconnect with the natural world. This emotional resonance explains why vintage garden design has such enduring appeal. It transcends mere decoration and becomes an experience. Before beginning a garden makeover, it is essential to approach it like an architectural project. Vision comes first. Homeowners and designers should ask themselves, what atmosphere do I want this garden to create? Is it a tranquil retreat, a social gathering space, or a showcase of artistic creativity? Once the vision is clear, the choice of recycled items and vintage elements can follow naturally. The process also requires patience. Unlike store-bought, prefabricated decor, vintage garden design evolves over time. Items are discovered gradually, plants grow and mature, and layers of character accumulate. This slow unfolding is part of its charm. It mirrors the natural cycle of growth and renewal. The essence of vintage garden makeovers is not about extravagance or size, but about meaning, connection, and creativity. By turning small gardens into green spaces filled with recycled treasures, we not only honor the past, but also build a more sustainable future. When we move from philosophy to practice, the art of transforming a small garden into a vintage green space becomes a process of creative problem solving. Every detail matters, from the choice of materials to the placement of furniture, from the selection of plants to the integration of decorative accents. This is not a matter of purchasing ready-made solutions, but of orchestrating a dialogue between old objects and living elements, between memory and function. One of the most effective strategies is to embrace repurposing as a design principle. Everyday items, often discarded, can take on new life in the garden. Wooden pallets can be reshaped into vertical planters for herbs and flowers. An antique bicycle can be transformed into a whimsical plant stand. Old barrels, clay pots with cracks, or chipped porcelain bowls can all be turned into unique vessels for greenery. These elements do not merely serve practical purposes, they add layers of narrative to the garden, each piece telling its own story while contributing to a larger aesthetic composition. The integration of recycled furniture is another powerful approach. A weathered bench with peeling paint immediately sets a nostalgic tone. A wrought iron chair, once forgotten, becomes a charming corner seat. Even mismatched pieces, one wooden chair, one metal stool, one wicker armrest, combine to create a casual yet intimate atmosphere. Unlike uniform modern patio sets, vintage gardens thrive on contrast and variety. The irregularity feels authentic, as if the garden has evolved naturally over time rather than being manufactured in a single moment. Lighting plays a crucial role in enhancing the vintage atmosphere. Instead of sleek, modern LED strips, consider lanterns, oil lamps, or fairy lights draped casually across a trellis. Candle holders made from old jars or solar lights hidden inside antique lantern casings add a warm, gentle glow. Light in a vintage garden should not be harsh or overly technical. It should feel soft, romantic, and welcoming, inviting evening conversations and quiet reflection. Plants, of course, are the heart of any garden, and in vintage design, they carry symbolic and stylistic weight. Traditional flowers such as roses, lavender, daisies, and hydrangeas bring a sense of familiarity and timelessness. Climbing plants like ivy, jasmine, or wisteria can soften walls and fences, blurring the boundaries between built structures and nature. Herbs such as rosemary, thyme, and mint not only provide fragrance and culinary value, but also reinforce the idea of practicality that vintage living embraced. Choosing plants that are resilient, slightly wild, or even imperfect aligns beautifully with the vintage aesthetic. One of the secrets to achieving balance in a vintage garden is the interplay between order and spontaneity. A neatly trimmed hedge alongside a bed of loosely growing wildflowers captures the tension between structure and freedom. An arched trellis may guide climbing vines, but the vines themselves grow with their own rhythm, creating an impression of effortless beauty. Vintage design celebrates this dialogue, acknowledging that gardens are living entities that evolve rather than static displays. Pathways are another essential design element. Instead of uniform tiles or polished concrete, a vintage garden might feature cobblestones, reclaimed bricks, or gravel. The sound of footsteps on gravel, the uneven texture of old stones, or the sight of moss creeping between bricks all contribute to an atmosphere of age and character. Even a small pathway leading from one corner to another can make a compact garden feel like a miniature world, inviting exploration. Water features also enhance the charm of vintage gardens. A small fountain crafted from repurposed stone, a bird bath made from an old ceramic bowl, or a trickling stream running through a reclaimed trough adds both sound and movement to the space. These elements not only attract birds and insects, supporting biodiversity, but also create sensory richness. The gentle sound of water is timeless and connects us to nature in a way that transcends design trends. The question of color is equally important. In vintage garden design, colors are often muted, aged, and natural. Soft pastels, earthy browns, weathered grays, and faded greens dominate the palette. Bright synthetic colors tend to clash with the atmosphere of nostalgia. Instead, the garden should look as though it has been touched by time. Painted furniture with worn edges, fabrics that have softened through use, and plant containers with a natural patina all contribute to this lived-in aesthetic. Beyond aesthetics, functionality is critical. A small garden must be efficient as well as beautiful. Storage solutions can themselves become part of the vintage theme. An old cabinet repurposed as a potting station, a trunk doubling as a storage bench, or hooks on a reclaimed wooden board serving as garden tool holders. These practical touches ensure the garden works as a usable space, not just as a visual spectacle. Another dimension is the use of vertical surfaces. Small gardens often lack ground area, but walls, fences, and even windowsills can become vibrant canvases. Hanging baskets filled with trailing plants, shelves holding collections of small pots, or an old ladder leaned against a wall with cascading flowers. These techniques extend the garden upward. They also create layers of depth, making the space feel more immersive. Incorporating art and ornamentation enhances personality. Vintage gardens welcome statues, old signs, weathered mirrors, or even broken architectural fragments. A section of wrought iron railing, a salvaged window frame, or a ceramic tile mosaic can all add artistic value. These are not mere decorations. They are artifacts that contribute to the story of the space. They spark curiosity, encouraging visitors to pause, observe, and imagine. Cultural influences can enrich the design further. A European-style courtyard may feature terracotta pots and wrought iron details. An Asian-inspired vintage garden might include bamboo, stone lanterns, or recycled wooden bridges. By borrowing from different traditions, the garden becomes not just a nostalgic retreat, but also a cultural tapestry. What makes these strategies so powerful is their ability to resonate with contemporary values. Today, people seek homes and gardens that reflect sustainability, mindfulness, and individuality. By reusing objects, embracing imperfection, and prioritizing personal expression, vintage garden design responds directly to these desires. It is not just about style. It is about creating meaningful spaces that align with how we want to live now and in the future. This practical approach also brings economic advantages. Instead of buying expensive new decor, homeowners can source items from flea markets, thrift stores, or even their own attics. The process of searching for these treasures becomes part of the experience, turning design into a journey rather than a transaction. This makes the garden not only more personal, but also more affordable and environmentally responsible. The transformation of a small garden into a vintage green space is therefore an act of layering history, personality, and function. Each object and plant adds another dimension, weaving together past and present, practicality and beauty, simplicity and richness. The result is not just a garden, but a stage where daily life unfolds with grace and authenticity. As the garden evolves, it gains character. Leaves fall, wood weathers, flowers bloom and fade, but the essence remains. Unlike pristine modern landscapes that require constant perfection, vintage gardens welcome change. They grow older with dignity, just like the objects within them, reminding us that beauty is not about flawlessness, but about stories lived and memories made. In this sense, the vintage garden is more than design. It is philosophy in action. It teaches patience, celebrates resilience, and honors the cycles of nature. It offers a gentle resistance to the fast-paced culture of disposability by proving that old things can be beautiful again. It reminds us that even in a small corner of the world, we can create a universe of meaning, nostalgia, and hope. Looking ahead, the future of vintage garden design is intertwined with broader architectural and lifestyle trends. As urban spaces continue to shrink and environmental awareness grows stronger, the demand for meaningful, sustainable, and character-rich gardens will only increase. The vintage approach, with its embrace of reuse, imperfection, and individuality, offers a model that feels both timeless and forward-looking. One key direction is the integration of smart technologies in subtle ways that do not compromise the aesthetic. For example, solar-powered lighting hidden inside antique lanterns combines modern efficiency with traditional charm. Irrigation systems can be automated, yet disguised within recycled containers, preserving the garden's authenticity while making maintenance easier. This blending of old and new reflects the larger architectural movement toward adaptive reuse, where historical elements coexist with contemporary innovation. Another evolving trend is the personalization of gardens as expressions of identity. Just as people curate their homes to reflect who they are, small outdoor spaces are becoming extensions of personal stories. A collection of vintage tools displayed on a garden wall may speak of family heritage. A mix of international artifacts may reveal the travels and passions of the homeowner. Plants themselves can be chosen for symbolic meaning, from roses that represent love to lavender that symbolizes calm. In this way, every vintage garden becomes not only a retreat, but also a narrative canvas. Sustainability will remain at the heart of future design. The urgency of climate change compels us to rethink consumption, and gardens are ideal laboratories for this mindset. Recycled wood, reclaimed stone, and repurposed metals reduce demand for new materials. Native plants support local ecosystems and require less water and care. Composting systems, often hidden within charming vintage bins or barrels, transform waste into nourishment for the garden. These practices not only preserve the character of the space, but also contribute to the health of the planet. In terms of style, we are likely to see an evolution toward hybrid aesthetics. While the core of vintage design remains rooted in nostalgia, future gardens may incorporate minimalist elements to balance complexity with clarity. For example, a sleek modern pergola might provide structure, while beneath it, vintage chairs and reclaimed pottery create warmth. This fusion speaks to a larger cultural desire for balance between order and spontaneity, between past and present, between human craft and natural growth. The role of gardens as spaces of wellness will also deepen. As societies become more urbanized and digital, the longing for restorative environments will intensify. Vintage gardens, with their emphasis on comfort and familiarity, will increasingly be seen as sanctuaries for mindfulness, meditation, and healing. Designers may integrate features such as quiet reading nooks, yoga platforms shaded by recycled wooden pergolas, or aromatherapy gardens with fragrant herbs and flowers. These are not luxuries but necessities, addressing the mental health challenges of modern living. Another fascinating possibility is the communal dimension of vintage garden design. Small individual gardens can connect through shared philosophies and aesthetics, forming networks of sustainable, character-rich spaces within neighborhoods. Community gardens might adopt vintage principles, repurposing old furniture and tools donated by residents, creating spaces that belong to everyone and carry collective memory. In this way, the design trend extends beyond private homes into public life, fostering community ties while reinforcing sustainability. Education and storytelling will also play a growing role. Workshops on upcycling, garden tours showcasing recycled designs, and social media platforms dedicated to vintage gardening will spread the philosophy to wider audiences. The process of transformation becomes not only a personal project, but a cultural movement. Sharing ideas, successes, and even imperfections encourages creativity and inclusivity. Every garden, no matter how small, can inspire others. From an architectural perspective, homes and gardens will be designed with greater synergy. Architects and landscape designers will collaborate more closely to ensure that indoor and outdoor spaces form a continuous experience. A vintage-inspired garden seen through a window may influence interior design choices, perhaps rustic wooden floors, antique fixtures, or earthy color palettes that harmonize with the outdoor view. The home and garden become one ecosystem of style and function, blurring boundaries between shelter and nature. Culturally, vintage garden design resonates because it answers a deep human need, the desire for connection. Connection to the past through objects with history. Connection to nature through plants and organic textures. Connection to self through personalization and storytelling. And connection to others through shared spaces and communal values. In an age where technology often isolates, the vintage garden reminds us of what endures. The beauty of old things, the resilience of nature, and the joy of creating meaning in small spaces. As we imagine the future, we can also envision how these gardens will age. Unlike contemporary designs that may feel outdated within a decade, vintage gardens grow more beautiful over time. Wood becomes softer, stone gains character, plants mature, and stories accumulate. The passage of years enhances rather than diminishes their charm. This quality makes them not only a trend, but a legacy, something that can be passed down to future generations as a gift of memory and sustainability. Practical innovations will continue to shape the possibilities. Designers may experiment with new ways of repurposing materials, transforming shipping pallets into modular seating, or reusing architectural fragments as sculptural features. Advances in sustainable materials, such as biodegradable composites, could be integrated seamlessly into vintage aesthetics. Even 3D printing, paradoxically, might play a role by producing components that mimic antique textures while using eco-friendly materials. The essence of vintage design lies not in rejecting the new, but in using it wisely to support timeless values. Ultimately, the future of vintage garden design is not about nostalgia alone. It is about continuity, honoring the past, enriching the present, and shaping the future. Small gardens become microcosms of a philosophy that values sustainability, individuality, and connection. They remind us that beauty does not require vastness, that meaning can be found in the humble and the aged, and that creativity flourishes within limits. In every chipped pot, every rusted gate, every blooming rose against a weathered wall, there is a lesson. That life is richer when we slow down, when we reuse rather than discard, when we celebrate imperfection, and when we design not just for ourselves, but for generations to come. The vintage garden is more than a design style. It is a vision of how we can live with grace, resilience, and authenticity in a world that constantly changes, yet longs for timeless roots.